Just some advice for those considering leaving Windows and installing Linux on your system. Now, the first thing is, I'd say, don't expect Windows, or if you're a Mac user, don't expect Mac. Now, that may be quoting the obvious, stating the obvious, but at the end of the day, you'd be surprised how many people, they jump into a room and they think, I don't recognize this room, and then they jump back out again. So that's the first thing. Don't expect things to be exactly the same. Yes, they are all operating systems, they serve similar purposes, but understand there's no point in switching rooms if there's no reason to go to that room. There's no point in switching rooms if the room is exactly the same and fulfills every purpose in exactly the same way. Sometimes when we experience a new situation, new variables, we struggle, panic, and think this is too much work, and then we abandon what we've discovered. It's worth sometimes making an effort to acquaint yourself with the new surroundings, because you might find it's a better place. I mean, someone who's been in prison for a long time is used to being looked after, they're institutionalized, and in many ways it might be a crutch for them. They might find it easy, and then as soon as they're let outside, they can't adjust very well, and so they go and commit a crime to get themselves thrown back inside. But those who maybe give it a bit of time, they'll be pleased they did, and they won't want to go back, and they realise it's better being free, or relatively free. And similar here, an operating system, you're used to a certain environment of working, and you don't perhaps realise the restrictions and the horizons that are being narrowed down for you. But when you break free and adjust to a new reality, you discover that, I didn't realise that I was suffering in this way before. So this is a possibility. What I'd say is, understand something is different, understand that Linux is different, and for many people it will be worth enduring the difficulties of the change. And there will be difficulties. Secondly, I'd say get used to the idea of desktop environments. On Linux there are different desktop environments, and these greatly impact on your user experience. There is the Gnome, or Gnome as they say it should be pronounced. There is different versions of that. Gnome Classic, Gnome 3, there's a Unity desktop environment that was disliked by a lot of people on the Ubuntu Linux flavour. KDE, very popular. Gnome and KDE are quite resource heavy. They use quite a lot of memory, but they give you a lot of features and a lot of razzmatazz, a lot of bells and whistles. There are other lighter desktop environments which are simpler, and but they're still highly configurable, like LXDE, Xfce, and there are many others, Cinnamon, Mate, there's loads. But the point is, sometimes someone is experiencing a desktop environment and they don't that they think that this desktop environment is the actual distribution itself, or that Linux flavor itself, whereas it's not, it's the desktop environment. And if you simply change the desktop environment when you're struggling, maybe that makes all the difference. Even some applications might run better under different desktop environments. So that's another big level of change from the Windows, and I expect the Mac world as well, where you have a lot of customization available to you. It gives you a lot of control. It gives you a lot of variety, obviously. So there is that. get used to them and see which ones you prefer. Maybe you like running different ones of them at different times. Maybe you like, if you install different Linux versions, if you set up different partitions on your disk and you set up different Linux versions, you might prefer some desktop environments under some different Linux flavors. So for instance, you might prefer KDE on OpenSUSE, you might prefer LXDE on Fedora, you might prefer Xfce on Linux Mint or something like that. You might like to regularly change them. This is all going to seem strange, and people might be thinking, well, what's the point of that? Why are you playing around for? Well, it's a bit like saying, why do you wear different clothes? Apart from for cleanliness reasons, I mean, you wear different styles of clothes, even though there's maybe no need to. You could just have a wardrobe of all the same things, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference to how you work. It makes a difference to how you view things. It can make a difference to how you feel. But there are functional reasons as well. Simplicity reasons, resource reasons. There might be various objectives to making changes, but my point is, don't just dive in, experience one desktop environment and think, oh, this is Linux, and think this is all there is. No, there's many possibilities even within that desktop environment. So it's something that you should learn a little bit about, play around with until you start to get the feel of things and what is possible for you. A third thing is, again, there are different applications on Linux. There are many things that are common, that are available across all platforms, all operating systems, or all the major operating systems: Mac, Windows, Linux. In the open source area especially. But there are things that are, they're very, let's say, dominant, or maybe only available on Linux. And so get used to those things again. Don't just think, oh, where is this? I don't find what I'm looking for that I was used to in the Windows world, therefore I'm getting out of here. No. Get used to a new program. Maybe you find it has advantages. Maybe you find it's not quite as good, but still worth sticking with for other reasons. So understand there are a whole range of different applications. On the major Linux distributions, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Fedora, OpenSUSE, and many others, you will install them, and they will have a software center or a package manager or both, and you will you'll see that thousands of applications are available in all areas. Graphics, office applications, programming tools, education, all sorts of areas, and can be maybe overwhelming for someone when they see, there's all these thousands of applications available, all of them free, let's say. But it's kind of exciting because it gives you an opportunity to try out different things, explore different areas, and it's all available from one place. It's not that it's restricted to one place, but it's available in one place. And again, that's very different to a world you may have experienced before, when someone comes up to you and they give you a big long menu with descriptions of what this would do for you and what that would do for you. So get used to that world, because it's an exciting new thing to it's a new path to walk down. You're used to walking a path where certain things are enforced on you, or you're forced to go into a certain direction, and then something else is opened up to you where there's all sorts of side roads and parks and swings and things. So it's quite a different world, and again, it's worth enduring some ignorance for a while. I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. Things are usually self-explanatory in those sort of areas, in terms of software centers and things like that, or the information and the how-to is easily available. So that is also worth sticking out for, holding your ground until you know what the score is. Another issue is the file hierarchy, or the file structure on Linux. Get used to that, learn a little about it. Don't take long, just see what the the main root file structures do. The root, let's say the first branch coming off of the root file system, what each of those folders does, what is its main purpose. You can look that up very quickly, and it will just help you to understand the way things are working, how they're organized, and when problems occur, if you can trace where's the source of those problems, or what is the nature of them, and also for you understanding how you organize your own system itself. It's also important for that reason. It's also related to how you partition your disk, because you might want to break up the way your system is organized in terms of what you are preserving, what you are separating. In terms of data, for instance, maybe you want your home, a separate partition on your hard disk for your home folder to protect your information, and then you want a different relationship with things that are changing all the time. And also it's related to how you're sizing, how you're allocating resources in the first place, what size partition you want to look at. There's loads of advice about this, and every user's needs are going to be different. What I would advise is to install multiple Linux distributions. Now, some people would advise against that for a new user, but seeing as you're going to take certain jumps anyway when you're installing Linux in terms of what you are doing with your hard disk, you're going to need like a partition for swap, which is virtual memory, which will basically be the same size as your random access memory, depending on the size of your RAM, basically, because as we're getting bigger and bigger, then the needs of swap to be as big often maybe not apply anymore. It used to be advised it was double, but this often doesn't apply. The reason why I advise installing multiple Linux distributions is because you may find that some things work better under some distributions than others, and also you don't want to be stuck just in case you mess up something, or something's not working, or you lose access to something. You don't want to be stuck with no access to your data or to what you've been doing on your computer. So if you install multiple versions, or at least two, at least you'll always have another root, especially if you make a separate data partition for your personal files. So but this is not the only reason. I mean, what you may find is after a year or so, or less than that, of being involved with Linux, you might be so enthusiastic about it that you don't want to just stick to one distribution. You want to experience many of them and use many of them on an ongoing basis, not just simply distro hopping, as they call it, keep on swapping what one you're using, but actually maintaining several updated on your system at a time, and you like to regularly use them, just like you visit different friends and wear different clothes, as we've said before. Now, make no mistake, Linux is man-made. You're going to run into problems. Even though it's stable, it's relatively fast, depending upon what you're running on there, what you're doing, and what flavour of Linux you have as well. You're still going to run into problems, and again, when you come across those problems, you shouldn't just panic and drop everything and abandon it. You should just investigate them. There are many sources, Google, forums, the official websites, the official documentation of the distribution you're using, and you may find a sense of education and development when you're solving these problems, and it will help you learn more about an operating system in general. I don't want to say that scaring you away, making you think that you're going to have to become a programmer to be running Linux. It's not the case, but still, that you are going to run into problems. I've been using various versions of Linux for I think around 5 years, and I have had problems, but I had problems on Windows, and so what you shouldn't think is that don't invent an imaginary past where everything was fine on Windows and on Linux there are problems. No, there will be problems. These things are man-made, and because of the nature of computing itself, the fact that it's integrating with so many different gadgets and formats, and the continuous updating of software, and the plethora of software applications that exist, then, and all of these things interfacing and having to harmonize to a degree, there are going to be hitches and problems all the time. But the difference is, on Linux you have a lot more trust in the updates. You feel that these updates are just purely for the improvement of the computing experience, so that things work. You don't feel that these things have a commercial agenda behind them, or a more sinister surveillance agenda, or anything like that. So you feel more confident about them. They're less intrusive. You have total control over them, really, and the more knowledgeable you are, the more control you have over them, obviously, and the more you understand what those updates are doing. This is something important to understand. But more important than all of these issues is to try and absorb the culture of Linux. Now, I don't mean by that adopting Linux users' opinions and thoughts and preferences on things. What I mean is taking in the wider picture of what it is to use free software, not in terms of free in terms of price, although it is mainly free in price, or almost totally the case if you want it to be that way, but freedom in terms of the fact that when you are downloading Linux applications and Linux operating systems, you feel that it is actually yours now to utilize fully. You're not being pushed into a certain direction. You're not being constantly threatened. Oh, if you copy this, if you do something to this, then we're threatening court action with you and things like that. So what I mean by the culture of Linux is that it's like a different planet to the world of Windows, and I'd say Mac as well, to the extent that I cannot stand the idea of going back to using computers with Microsoft Windows on. And it's not because Microsoft Windows isn't a good operating system, and it's not because Microsoft have particularly targeted me with anything that I'm aware of, although you could have a discussion about that from another angle, but it's something you have to really experience to know what I'm talking about. And I would say even a lot of other Linux users probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's the idea of this large, this massive choice mixed with control and freedom. Even if some things, in terms of applications, even if some applications do not meet the standard of proprietary software that's available for, let's say, Windows and Mac, it's not that. It's the only way I can describe it is by way of an analogy, and this doesn't really give it justice at all, but if you, let's say, some people, they prefer to be in prison. I know I keep coming back to prison examples, and it's going to make you think that I've been in prison, but I haven't. If someone is in prison, they might like it because they might think, I'm fed 3 times a day. I have access to some form of education, even if it's heavily directed and controlled. I have access to exercise facilities, a doctor maybe in prison, medical facilities, things like this, if I'm in need, and I'm secure, and so all of those things are more or less true. And on top of that, someone might say, well, there's certain standards when you're being fed in prison where the food has to be of a certain level. And let's say you're eating porridge every day there. I mean, I don't know whether they do or not, but let's say they do, and that porridge is good for you, right? I mean, porridge is good. I like porridge. I mean, I've heard that they just give you porridge with water there rather than milk, but let's just imagine that they gave you porridge with milk. Now, I do have porridge with milk sometimes myself. I think it's excellent, but I don't want to have it every day, and I don't want to be forced into having it either. I like to cook for myself, for instance, a variety of things. So even if you're being forced to have something, it's not the same as having total choice whether you have something or not, or whether you have something different. There's a big difference in those things. So you might live in a controlled society where things are secure, but you have absolutely no choice whatsoever in anything, and that can be quite stifling, and it's even worse. It's one bad thing is to recognize that, okay? But even worse than that is if you don't recognize it, and imagine you think everything's okay. So when the veil is then lifted off your eyes, when the blindfold is removed, and you experience then choice, you experience control, you experience, let's say, stability, security, efficiency, creativity, then it's a totally different world, and you won't want to return to the previous world, even if some things in your experience were better before, even if some things are given a higher degree of professionalism just simply because of the money that's pumped into some things. It's different when you are in control of your own situation and then cooperating with other people to make things better. And that's the amazing thing about Linux. It's a tremendous achievement of human cooperation. When you think, there are companies who fund various parts of it on different levels, but overall you're talking about enthusiasts, you're talking about users, you're talking about people who are dedicated to serving certain problems all around the world, and through this they've developed what is regarded by most experts, really, when you push them on it, to be the best operating system in the world. Now, in terms of an end user experience, that's a subjective thing, but overall, in terms of efficiency, the way it's built, the way it's structured, and so many other things to do with it, you notice benefits even if you're not that knowledgeable, even if you're not aware of what a lot of things do. You notice many benefits that are absent elsewhere, and this is something that you might not snap onto immediately, but if you use it and get more used to the feel or the experience of the contrast between where you are and where you were before, you might then have some taste of what I'm talking about and not ever want to go back. I mean, it seems crazy. Some people say, look man, you've let this go to your head, you're going nuts. But it's like, I'm very enthusiastic about it. At the same time, realizing that it's not perfect, and there are problems, maybe even regular problems. especially in some particular areas. But still, the contrast is such that you wouldn't want to go back to being in a straitjacket. You wouldn't want to go back to this imaginary hotel that is actually a prison.